VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, Artificial Divide, hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guests Robert Kingett, Lawrence Gunther, Niki White, and Tessa Soderberg.
Welcome to the VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for VocalEye. I'm your host for these Almost Live events, and I'm a member of the blind community. And I want to just take a moment to say a big, huge, I don't know how huge can it be, but a big thank you to all of those who have made donations and who have supported VocalEye. It's been very much appreciated. And there's always a link in the chat if you feel like you have the capacity for financial contributions. However, there is also other ways to support us, which would include testimonials and letters of support. And we have received lots of those. So please keep those coming. They're a joy to read and our funders really appreciate them. And if you happen to be watching this particular event tonight from our YouTube channel, we really hope that you hit that like and subscribe button. Ingrid is not going to be with us this evening, and Ingrid typically offers our land acknowledgement. So tonight I will be offering the land acknowledgement. So VocalEye is broadcasting to you all from the traditional and stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And last week I shared with you about the family of languages that the Coast Salish First Nations have within their culture. And this week I wanted to share with you a bit about the history of the salmon and the legend of the salmon within Coast Salish culture, because as we are here in summertime, there may be salmons on a barbecue near you. So the Coast Salish peoples are from the Pacific Northwest coast line in Canada and the United States, colonial Canada and the United States. They were making their traditional villages at the mouths of rivers, which meant that the salmon had become a real staple part of their diet. But salmon also has served as a source of wealth and trade, and is deeply embedded in the culture and identity of Coast Salish people. Salmon leave their freshwater spawning and their fresh habit spawning and rearing habitat as juveniles, and then they go out into the ocean where they grow and spend their adult lives, and then they return to that freshwater habitat, the same original habitat, and it's like 3 to 5 years later, and then they spawn and then they die. And the Coast Salish peoples understood this cycle of life really well. So they knew the various times of various species of salmon and when they could find them and how they could catch them. So various species of salmon, for folks who don't know, Chinook, coho, sockeye salmon, chung, and pink salmon are some of the most popular ones. But salmon was also a gift from the benevolent salmon king. So it was revered as a gift. And these Coast Salish peoples believed that salmon were immortal, and that they were immortal, and that when they were in the ocean itself, that they took human form, that they lived in sort of separate houses according to their species, and that every year the salmon king would order the people to clothe themselves in fish skins and go up to the river as a present to the people. And this is it's a lovely tradition. This also perpetuated their races. So they were able to, when they were meeting and gathering in spaces, people meet each other, so to speak. So in honor of the gift, the locals were treated to annual arrivals of salmon. They were treated to festival and ceremony and gathering. And it just sounds like a really lovely way to build community, as we are doing here this evening. So I just wanted to share this little piece of history that I had learned about the salmon and its connection to the Coast Salish people, how it's been revered in culture, as it's been seemed as a blessed gift in terms of food, and that they use the skins for clothing. So this is yet another example of how the Coast Salish people have connected with the lands, and that the oral traditions and the histories continue to this day, because Coast Salish people, if you go back far enough in the archives, have been around since 9000 BC, so 9000 before Christ. So that's a long time. So that's what I wanted to offer with our land acknowledgement this evening, is a little bit of learning around the salmon. I want to welcome folks officially to this Wednesday, July the 13th, 2022. Tonight, we are proud to offer you our almost live event number 92, Artificial Divide. And we're calling it Artificial Divide because there's a book called Artificial Divide. And before we get into this book, I want to welcome, the co-author and head of the book. The inspiration for the book came from Robert. So Robert, join us in the space.
Hello.
Hello, Robert. Hello. It's such a pleasure to have you in the space with us this evening. So Artificial Divide is a book that came from your inspiration. What was it about wanting, what was it that made you want to create a book?
Yes. So I'm an author, so I basically write things for a living. I have arguments with myself, and then I write them down on paper. So that's But I was noticing, here in the U.S. anyway, books that were being published had disabled characters in them, except almost none of them were written by disabled authors.
Mhm.
So I'm like, like, let's try to kill two birds with one stone. Let's give everybody a sample of the talent that's out there, as well as give other people a leg up or like a boost that maybe would not have uh, that maybe would not have gotten the spotlight to begin with. Uh,
Mhm.
um, because if you're disabled in any way, you know how hard it is um, to make people see your work as valuable. So that's what I wanted to do, is basically create an anthology that would showcase the many blind and visually impaired talent that nobody is paying attention to.
Yeah. Had you written a book before, Robert? Because you said that you were, having arguments in writing. So,
Yes,
because
yeah,
I think it would be scary to publish a book.
yes, it's very scary, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, a lot of contracts back and forth. Oh my goodness. Uh, 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 um, but it's very rewarding,
So,
after
yeah,
the book is out.
after
Yeah.
yeah, after the book is out.
Yeah.
Well, how long did it take to put this book together, this anthology?
Phew. Holy cow. It took nearly 2 years from conception to accumulating all the stories to picking the ones I wanted, to making sure that the book was um, to making sure that um, the order of the stories was exactly right. And so yes, it's a lot of work. So, woo boy.
Yeah, 2 years is, I mean, listen, that's not for the faint of heart to tackle something of that magnitude. Um, was there a publisher that was willing to publish this before? Like, did you pitch a concept to a publisher and then they were like, "We're in," or did you have to get all the content and then go find a publisher?
So I have a literary agent. So like I actually went through him and I said, hey, I'd really like to do this anthology, and then here are the authors uh, I want in this anthology, uh, uh, um, but ironically enough, none of the authors I pre-chose made it into the anthology. So that's but I pitched a concept to him, and pitched I pitched an outline, and I said I would just really like to do this, and he said, okay, let me reach out. Um, so he reached out to quite a bit of publishers, and we found a publisher that was more than willing to take it on. So, yay.
Yeah, that's serendipitous, right? It's like the universe aligned for this to come together.
Yes.
When you say that you had invited some initial authors and then those folks didn't end up being a part of this anthology, how did you go about finding folks who wanted to submit stories?
uh, Spamming the whole entire internet. So, uh, uh,
You were trolling, you
basically.
were fishing.
Yes, basically, like like I was sharing and publishing everywhere that you could possibly imagine, like, please submit to this anthology, because I really because I also wanted to prove a point as well, um that these kind of stories are heavily sought after. Even if you don't have a disability, there's a lot of allies that would just love to read a collection like this.
Mhm.
So I really wanted this anthology to work so that I could create more. So, yay.
Yeah, I think that that is super important again when we talk about representation, which you touched on already, in terms of who's writing these stories, who's writing our stories. Um, because I too, I love to, and this is why folks are gathered here this evening, is to listen to stories that have been written by community members, right? Because it's there's not so easy to find that content out in the universe.
No, it's not. I have been looking for years and years and years, and there's only a handful. I mean, sure, there's a lot of nonfiction memoirs by blind and visually impaired authors, but that didn't really fill the niche I was hoping
Mhm.
to to fill. So I just wanted more fiction stories, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Hard to find. Yeah, you're a published author outside of this anthology. So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the other books that you've published?
Yes, sure. So I published a memoir that is called Off the Grid: Living Blind Without the Internet. Um, it, it's under a Creative Commons license now, so feel free to make a podcast version of it, uh, turned into Braille, uh, turn it into some obscure uh, file format, and make it into a YouTube series. Do whatever you want to with it. So, so that was my first book. This is my second. Um, right now, I'm currently on submission uh, for a play and a novel. Um, the novel, it's a young adult novel about a blind sibling and a sighted person. It's kind of like a Freaky Friday situation where they
Ah,
switch bodies, and then one of them has to learn how to not how to live life as a sighted individual. So yeah.
I love that twist, because you're
Mhm.
expecting to hear somebody say the sighted person has to learn how to live like a blind person.
Yep.
But when you have been without your sight for your whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and you acquire that,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge transition.
Yep. Yep.
So I love that sort of flip of the switch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you'll let us know when that book is ready to consume.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, Robert, I know that we have an introduction to play, and before we play the introduction, which you wrote, I'm curious about where the term or the title "Artificial Divide" came from.
Sure. So the title, actually, I sometimes think I'm too clever for my own good. So, like, I was trying to be really clever, and kind of playing on the notion that uh, because we're blind, we're like an alien species, you know. Uh, um, but this anthology proves that through the myriad of stories and the experiences that you're going to see in this anthology, that actually we're not really, uh, really that kind of foreign. There are things that you can relate to, even if you don't have a disability. So there's really no divide at all. Hence the artificial part.
Right. I
So
love
yeah.
that. So the human who's narrated your introduction and has narrated many of the stories is Cyrus Marcus Ware, correct?
It's actually Nathan
Oh,
Nathan Frechette.
pardon me.
So
Oh
yes.
gosh, just sounds like Cyrus to me. Um, that's a compliment to both of those human beings
Yes.
who are narrating. So
Yes.
I think maybe what we'll do, Robert, is we'll go ahead and we'll play the audio of the introduction that you wrote,
Mhm.
so folks can get a real sort of flair as to what the anthology is about, and then we'll get into listening to some of the stories. All right, Rick, when you're ready, if you can play the introduction for us, it's about 7 minutes long, friends.
Introduction by Robert Kingett. I remember the first out and proud fiction book I read that included an openly gay character. Actually, this book had gone above and beyond. It was a gay utopia for me because some of the characters are also openly trans and proud of who they are. What made this book so special to me was the fact that it was a safe space before I knew what a safe space was. The book is Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan. Growing up in Florida, I don't remember anyone encouraging me to read books with openly gay or bi or trans people in it. People loved the fact that I loved to read, but I was never actively shown any books with LGBT plus characters and themes. I had to find those books on my own. Even after I'd found them, I had to keep them in the closet with me because I knew society didn't see them as normal. I just can't shake those early years of thinking I wasn't wired the way the rest of society seemed to be, just because I am not at all sexually attracted to women. I didn't understand how a book such as The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot was only for girls, and why I shouldn't be reading it. I didn't understand publishing's desire to keep telling stories about non-disabled, straight white men. I thought, if everybody has a story, then where are the stories about people who are black or trans or gay or disabled? If I take a minute to try to think of fictional characters with disabilities in books, my brain comes up with few options. I've read many great memoirs by disabled people, ones where I felt seen and heard because they shared my struggles, but I can't say the same thing about fiction. Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan was special to me, because it was a story involving LGBT plus characters. Nobody was overcoming their gender identity the way disabled memoirists seem to beat their disabilities on every page. I was hungry for some fun stories that just happened to have blind or visually impaired characters telling us their fictional tale of adventure or mystery. Even in the nonfiction I've read by blind people, they all seem to be about overcoming the world, not just living in it while experiencing drama and or romance. The protagonist always had to overcome blindness or learn how to be blind. The characters always saw the blind protagonist as either strange, scary, helpless, super gifted, flawless, ignorant, clumsy, or unable to function. The memoirist would have no choice but to prove them wrong about their blindness. It made me exhausted trying to find books by disabled authors where the visually impaired protagonist just had to deal with the plot of the story, not their blindness and the plot at the same time. As an openly gay man, I'm witnessing in real time the progress publishing is making towards telling LGBT plus stories. LGBT plus is moving away from a genre label and characters are just LGBT plus, which is great. I feel honored watching that growth. As a blind man, though, I'm afraid I'm not seeing the same progress with disabled stories. More times than I'd like to admit, I've Googled fiction books with blind characters. The results are not promising every time. I go to page 4 or 5 of the Google search results hoping I'd find a golden egg somewhere, but the results are disappointing. For one thing, a lot of books featuring visually impaired characters are written by sighted authors. While I don't necessarily have a problem with this, I keep running into stories that are inauthentically told because a sighted writer always shows a visually impaired character dictating to their phone without using a screen reader, for example. One exception I can remember is a book called WWW Wake by Robert J. Sawyer. In that book, the protagonist uses a cane properly, uses a screen reader with the keyboard for a long time on the page, and is just a smart blind girl who is dealing with the plot. Even though I still go back and read WWW Wake occasionally, I'm hungry for more modern fiction featuring visually impaired characters. I know there are others out there just like me who are eagerly seeking books that have people like them on the page. That's where this anthology comes into play. This anthology features blind and visually impaired authors telling their own stories. Some authors are emerging authors, some are more established, but they all have something to show you about being low vision. There's a wide range of writing styles, genres, and even character archetypes in this anthology. Not every story will have a happy ending. Not every protagonist will be nice. That's the point, though. This anthology compiles snapshots of blindness to show that blind people can be witty, blind people can be crude, blind people can be whimsical, blind people can be clever or brash. Visually impaired people have to educate the sighted daily on what it's like to be visually impaired. This even happens sometimes because sighted people expect us to be teachers. This book might not be an instruction manual on how blind and visually impaired people use a computer, but it will open your eyes to characters who have flaws, outsmart bullies, learn to trust their skills, and are mischievous to get what they want. The authors in this collection are just a snippet of the talent that's cast aside for established sighted people, who really should step aside and let disabled voices take the publishing contracts. I hope that you, dear reader or listener, go through this anthology with the understanding that artificial divide isn't meant to take away from sighted authors trying to be allies. We desperately need allies, but we also need people willing to listen when blind people want to tell the stories they want to tell, with grit and grace. It might be difficult to empathize with some of these characters. You may love every story in this collection. That's okay. It's your journey through this book. I'd like you to ponder how you feel after reading this collection. I think you'll find that even though you may be sighted or visually impaired, and even though this character would never be your friend in real life, you do have things in common, and maybe we're not so divided after all. Robert Kingett, Co-Editor-in-Chief.
Okay, that's a lovely introduction, Robert, to what we're about to experience. Sets us up perfectly for the anthology. So I want to just transition into inviting Lawrence Gunther, who is our first storyteller this evening. Robert, I would love for you to introduce this story before we listen to it.
Yeah, sure. So the story is called Getting Back Alive, and it's so ironic because usually I'm not a fan of nature stories, but this one, I mean, it grabbed me from the get-go. When I read it, I was like, ooh, 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 yay! Here's a blind person battling um the 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 environment, I guess you will, and how to navigate that. And that was very intriguing to me. So when I was reading it, I was really hooked, and I was like, "Oh, yay! This is totally awesome. It should go in the anthology."
I've listened to it once before. Actually, I've listened to it twice before, if I'm honest.
Mhm.
When the book first came out and we connected over this, Robert, and now of course to prep for tonight. So we've got Lawrence with us in the space. Lawrence is joining us from the East Coast. Lawrence, say hello. Where are you joining us from? Lawrence is on mute. Give Lawrence a chance to unmute. That's that forced mute thing that we do to folks, that evilness we do.
Oh, there we go. So I
There
tried
we
to
go.
unmute before, but they wouldn't let me. But now they're letting me. Thank you.
Yeah, the benevolent God is saying, yeah, okay, fine, unmute. Where are you joining us from, Lawrence?
Ottawa, Canada.
You're joining us all the way from Ottawa, Canada.
Ottawa.
Ottawa.
Yes.
We have some folks that joined from Ottawa in this space.
Oh,
What do we need to know anything from you about the setup of this book before we hit play, or the story?
you know what? I wrote this story and I thought, well, I write a lot of stuff for magazines and blogs and stuff. And I wanted to do something fictional and I wanted to write something funny. So I wrote it and I showed it to my wife and I didn't say anything. I said, "Hey, read this." And she read it and I said, "What do you think?" And she goes, "It's horrifying." And I said, "Oh well." I said, so I just put it in the in the file of my computer, and I forgot about it because I think, well, can't put, I thought I wanted it to be funny, and to me it was funny, but she thought it was horrifying. And then when I saw Robert's call, I said, blind people they'll think this is funny. So I sent it in. And I don't know if Robert thought it was funny or not. He obviously thinks it's me against the environment, but it's me against two doofuses that I go fishing with.
Yes.
And some fictional characters and just stuff happens. But you know what? I write from my experience, and my experience is being in the outdoors. So there's a lot of detail in there, but that's the way I live, right? So I just add in stuff that I know, and to make the story a little richer. I think it's all relevant. All the details relevant to the story, and maybe it brings you into the story.
Awesome. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll have a listen. It's about 15 minutes long, friends. So let's sit back and listen to Getting Back Alive.
Getting Back Alive by Lawrence Gunther. Content warning. Being blind and lost in a winter storm, and ableism. It was a typical February morning when I set off for a day of ice fishing for walleye with a couple of guys I met over Facebook. The fishing was good. The company, not so much. No angler, blind or not, should ever have to go through what I experienced. The first rule of ice fishing is never trust the ice. It's especially true when fishing on rivers that are, at best, only partially frozen. Hooking up with other anglers is normal because of our unwritten code to always pair up. Unlike the ice, however, a guy should be able to trust his fishing buddies. Judging by their text messages, the two guys I planned a day of ice fishing with seemed all right. Neither had a vehicle of their own and were happy to take me up on my offer to use my truck. I explained I was a blind angler, as sometimes this can be a deal breaker. It's the sort of information I never like to spring on someone at the last minute. But for some reason, These two guys never quite seemed to have grasped the concept of blind. It does happen on occasion that someone I'm just getting to know might forget, but not over and over again. Could it be that these guys confused my being a blind angler with someone who fishes blind? Fishing blind is what all of us anglers do when we have no idea where to cast next. Of course, it could all be my imagination, which my wife says can be quite lively at times. I'll let you be the judge. Looking back, I think the day first started going downhill when we were preparing to head on to the ice. Somehow, I ended up with the giant sled. This thing is at least twice the width of a regular gear hauler. Over hard-packed snow on bare ice, it's not a big deal as long as the load is reasonable. Add a few inches of soft snow, though, and it's like pulling out a snowmobile stuck in a slush. I understand that someone had to pull the bigger of the 3 sleds, but what bothered me the most is the way the guys divided up the gear. I ended up with a double thermal pop-up tent, 2 full minnow buckets, 3 folding metal chairs, a propane heater, and extra propane tanks. They even tossed in the ice spud, sonar unit, and several backup lead-acid batteries. Between the 2 other much smaller sleds, the guys divided up the auger, 3 tackle bags, ice fishing rods, and seat cushions. By the time I became aware of the sled assignments and the imbalance in our respective loads, the guys were already heading out of the parking lot and onto the ice. It was all I could do to catch up. These plastic gear haulers make quite a bit of racket when dragged over ice or hard snow, so I just follow the sound. Well, that's how it's supposed to work anyway. It doesn't work so well if you're not in earshot. I worked up quite a sweat just trying to keep up. Our goal was to set up over water 7 meters, 21 feet, deep, close to where the river bottom begins to rise. This meant heading away from shore and towards the open moving water in the middle of the river. Naturally, everyone knows the closer you get to open water, the thinner the ice. Being the owner of the gas auger, the guys thought it was best if I drilled the test holes myself. I must have drilled a dozen holes in search of the perfect depth. With all of the stopping and starting and hole drilling, I ended up losing my sense of direction. I had no idea which way we came from, and worse, in what direction was the open water. Based on the ice thickness measurements the guys took, we had a good 20 centimeters, or 8 inches, of solid ice underfoot, so I knew we were safe. In total, I think we walked at least a kilometer. I always feel a sense of growing excitement when I'm heading out to go fishing, right up until I take my first cast, or in this case, drop my line through the hole. It's the anticipation that makes all the effort and preparation worthwhile. It wasn't long before we were all catching walleye. I caught one giant I thought for sure would win me our bet on biggest fish. But according to the guys, my fish was just a bit short of one caught and released just moments before. Normally, I like to measure my own fish using the tactile ruler on the handle of my Frabel ice scoop, but they insisted on doing all the measuring. Without the 2 fish to compare, I had no choice but to pay the guys $20. I know anglers are known for stretching the size of fish caught, fish that seem to grow bigger each time the story is told. But it's an unwritten rule that without proof, we never call each other out on important matters like fish size. However, there are exceptions to this rule, as witnessed during professional bass fishing tournaments that now conduct polygraph tests of top 10 winners. The river we were fishing was known for holding giant lake sturgeon years ago. One of the guys actually hooked into one of these massive fish that they swear measured at least 3 meters long. They were going on and on about just how hard the fish was pulling, and seemed to be enjoying themselves immensely trying to reel it in. The guys claimed it was so big, there was no way it was going to fit through the hole in the ice. I never did get to feel the fish myself, as they managed to release it under the ice. Now, there's a time each of us are convinced that we are hooked into a true monster, only to find out that it was nothing more than a tree branch, or worse, a boot. I'm not saying these guys were deluded, so in the interest of maintaining good relations, I kept my mouth shut. We decided not to relocate into shallower water to take advantage of the late-day bite, but instead to head straight back to the truck. It was around then that things took a turn for the worse. According to my weather app, the wind was now blowing steady at 40 kilometers per hour directly down the river and straight into our faces. The temperature was dropping fast, and the wind chill was approaching minus 28 degrees Celsius. Taking down my double-wide pop-up ice shelter turned out to be quite the challenge. The guys had me hold the guide ropes as they unscrewed the ice anchors. Now, any ice angler familiar with using tents on ice for shelter knows it's important to never let wind get underneath the tent when removing the screws holding it to the ice. The last thing you want is to have one of these pop-up tents turned into a giant parachute. I learned the hard way that these guys were new at this. It was touch and go there for a bit, but I finally managed to wrestle the tent back down to the ice. But not before I was dragged about a couple dozen meters. Only then did the guys recover from the shock of what had just happened and rallied up to help squeeze the tent back into the carrying bag. I mentioned earlier that day to the guys that I thought the weight distribution between the 3 sleds was unequal. Even still, by the time I finished packing up my own gear and discovered the guys had given me the same sled and load, they were already heading for the truck. The wind was now blowing so hard, the noise generated in the hood of my parka almost drowned out all sound. Worse, fresh snow was flying, further impinging on my ability to hear. Falling snow is like fog to the blind. It deadens sound. Fresh snow also mutes the sound of footfalls and, more importantly, the sound of sleds being dragged over the ice. Add to this the sound of strong wind buffeting my head, and it was all adding up to a total loss of my ability to hear. You would think that I could count on the guys to look back once in a while to keep an eye on me, but there was that incident on our way out that still bugged me. A seat cushion had fallen off one of the guys' sleds. Judging by how much time it took to walk back to fetch the cushion and return, I could tell these guys weren't in the habit of looking back and checking their loads. A rookie mistake. I was starting to worry that neither of these guys were checking, and we were about to end up in one of these situations. Me? I thought you were checking on the blind guy. I'm not sure how fast the guys were walking, but despite my hustling to catch up, it wasn't long before the only sled I could hear being dragged over the fresh snow was my own. Given the strong wind and falling snow, I had no choice but to call out to the guys for verification on their location. Each time they seemed to be further away. Not knowing which way to walk can be a bit disconcerting if you can't see, and there's no actual snowmobile or well-established trail to feel along with your feet. Adding to my challenge was the fact that my forward direction began to meander. I'm sure if you look back at my trail in the fresh snow, it would have resembled something akin to a hunting dog flushing game birds. The extra distance I was covering due to my meandering and my having to fight wind, deepening snow, and the weight of my jumbo sled was adding up to make my walk back to the truck more than a bit challenging. For some reason, I began veering to the right. I don't think it had anything to do with strong winds, or the possibility that I may have a dominant left leg. In hindsight, I think it was some sort of primal survival instinct kicking in. I had to fight the urge to turn right and head to where I thought the shore was, as I knew I was still quite far from the road and parking lot. Heading to shore now would be like admitting defeat. Not long later, I started to suspect that the strip of ice we were following between the bank and the open water was, in fact, considerably narrower than the guys had led me to believe. I kept telling myself that it was only my imagination and pushed on. I didn't panic. Instead of my turning a hard right and heading for the shore, I drew on my extensive experience as a blind sailor. By orienting myself using the feel of the wind on my body as a reference point, I felt confident I would orient my way back to the parking lot. To stay warm, I pulled my hat down to the tip of my nose and zipped my jacket all the way up till my collar met my hat. There was just the smallest slit to allow fresh air to enter my nose. I had pretty much eliminated any chance of frostbite, never mind snow blindness. I have to admit, I was starting to get a bit angry with the guys for rushing back to the truck and leaving me behind on the ice. Even if they were suffering way more than me with their eyes and faces exposed to the wind, that's no excuse to leave someone behind. I eventually stopped calling out for directions. It became pointless. Obviously, the strong wind and distance meant they could no longer hear my shouts. I kept walking straight into the wind, using the talking compass on my iPhone and the feel of the wind on my body to keep on track. Suddenly, I felt the angle of the ice beneath my feet shift. My initial thought was that I had strayed too close to the center of the river and was now stepping on ice that had shifted from the current. Could it be that I was now walking on rafting ice? I stopped and trained my ears to listen for the sound of moving water, or worse, ice cracking. Not wanting to linger, I had no choice but to move forward. All my senses were strained to the max for any sound or feeling of ice shifting beneath my feet. I had my ice picks in their holders in the front of my jacket just in case I broke through. I was also wearing my flotation suit. Still, even if I wasn't going to sink and had the tools needed to extract myself from a hole, I was walking on a frozen river and would have to deal with the current. Unfortunately, every year we lose anglers who break through the ice and are swept away under the ice by the current, only to be found miles downstream in the spring after the ice has melted. You can't imagine the relief that flooded through my mind and body when I realized I was walking on the broken and sloping ice near shore. I could also feel the tracks of others in the snow, so I knew I was in the right area. Before I knew it, I was standing in the parking lot. The guys had wasted no time unloading their sleds into the back of the truck and getting the motor started to heat up the cab. Following the sound of the engine, I made my way over to the truck and stowed my gear, managing to slide my giant, double-wide sled into the box on top of all the other gear. I squeezed myself into the back alongside the guys' coats, snow pants, boots, tackle bags, fishing rods, and all the other personal gear that can get lost or damaged if stowed in the truck box with the larger, heavier items. I was squished in, but thankful for the warmth. I barely had my door shut before the truck shot forward. The guys said they wanted to get to the beer store before it closed. I was so upset, I almost told these guys off. But I still needed to get home. Will I ever go fishing with either of them again? Highly unlikely. They still owe me for gas. I know the rule is to never go ice fishing alone. It's why I occasionally have to reach out over social media to find someone who has the same day off to work and family responsibilities as I do. I would be surprised if someone doesn't invent a fishing buddy finder app, something along the lines of that Tinder app the guys said they were using to plan catfishing trips. Being a blind outdoor enthusiast means taking risks. Whether I'm in my blind fishing boat, on my kayak, wading a river, or fishing aboard my big boat on a stormy day, there are risks. The same goes for everyone. The difference being that most of the safety rules people go by are designed to keep sighted people safe. In many ways, I'm having to write my own rules through trial and error.
Okay, that was Getting Back Alive. We're going to bring Lawrence back into the space and make sure that Lawrence can unmute himself. And give Lawrence a moment here. I think we got you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
All right. Sorry. I was playing with that button and it kept moving around.
Oh, yeah, I know. Don't you love it when technology does this like random stuff to us? Oh. What an interesting story, Lawrence. You had mentioned to us before we played it that you write from stuff that you know. So how much of the story is stuff you've experienced and how much of it is just like pure fiction?
Everyone, you know what? I some people read the story, like some of my buddies, and they think it's totally true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, why the hell can't I write fiction? Like I should be able to write fiction. And just because I'm blind And it doesn't mean I'm always writing these testimonials from, from my life. Give me a break, cut me some slack here. Hello. It's my experience, and, it's my knowledge that I'm putting into this. And I go fishing with guys. Sometimes I know more or less. But I was trying to have some fun with it. And, I listen to it now, and I'm painfully reminded how inadequate this story is, though, and I wish I could change this and that, the other thing.
Oh my gosh, it's not inadequate. Like,
No.
don't you dare say
Yeah, I haven't.
So the two buffoons we're gonna just lovingly use the term you threw out there, buffoon.
Yeah.
Were they people that you had encountered, or based on people that you had encountered in some kind of way?
You know what? I won't name names, but they are an accumulation or a culmination of my friends.
Do they know this?
I haven't shown it to them. I figured they'll, what's the chance of them getting this book, right? Like, so, I'm safe. I'm safe. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to piss them off. But look, if you're going to go do outdoor stuff with a blind person, you got to have a sense of humor, because stuff happens all the time, right? Stuff happens. And face it, when I'm going out fishing with a sighted person and there's two of us on a boat, it's happened before where I was in the Florida Everglades, and they call it the backcountry for a reason. It's just, you're in the middle of nowhere. There's a million islands and a million channels. And I'm with this gentleman I hired the night before, and I'm on his boat. We're way back there in the middle of nowhere fishing. And he's on the back of the boat, pushing the boat around with a pole. And I'm standing on the front of the boat casting and so on. And then we go over some rough water to get into this bay, sort of the breakers. And I hear the pole go padonk against the side of the boat. And I turn around, I go, Bob? And he goes, yeah, no worries, Lawrence. I just fell out of the boat.
Oh no.
But I was only 3 or 4 feet deep. So he climbed back in, and he said, look, I was pushing on the pole, and then the boat just dropped out from beneath me because it came down a wave. And I had a choice. I could either fall into the boat and risk, breaking his ankle, or fall out of the boat and land in the soft water. So he decided to fall out of the boat and climb back in afterwards. But I said, well, that's great, Bob. But I said afterwards, I said, if you had bumped your head,
oh no.
First of all, I'd never find you. And second, no one would ever find me. I'd never get out of there. But so for sure, there's a risk, right? There's a risk. It's why, like, when you scuba dive as a blind person, you have a guide, and that guide has a safety person. They're not counting on you to rescue them if something happens down there. There's got to be 3 of you when you scuba dive. But we don't do that when we're fishing. Most of my sighted friends, they're fine to go out with me, and they're savvy enough not to kill themselves and kill me. So we do okay.
Have you had any close? I was going to say close encounters, because that now I've got artificial divide and Robert's metaphor of us being aliens in my mind. But have you had any close calls with, like, wilderness, and, like, when you go home, you think to yourself, gosh, I came pretty close?
Well, 2 weeks ago, we were out on my boat, and the day before, the tournament was canceled on the Otto River because of high winds. So the next day, we're looking at our apps. Oh no, there was that big storm that knocked out all the power here in Ottawa. So listen to this. Here's a good story. So I'm sitting in my truck in my driveway. We got the boat hooked up. I'm sitting with my buddy. He's a fishing guide on the Otto River, and it's 12 o'clock noon. We want to go fishing. And I'm looking at my weather app, and he's looking at his radar app. And my weather app says severe thunderstorms between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, 100%. And he's looking at his radar, and he said, Lawrence, my radar says that storm is way out the other end of Toronto. It's not going to be here until like 5:30 in the afternoon. We should go now. I said, well, my weather app says it's going to be here in an hour and a half. I said, look, and he goes, no, just trust me. I know what I'm doing. I do this for a living. I'm a guide. I know what I'm doing. And I said, look, go home, have lunch, come back, and we'll see. We'll see what happens, So he goes home, and he's driving back to my place around 2 o'clock, and right about then our phones start going off with these alerts, weather alerts, like the really noisy noise.
Mm-hmm.
And he calls me and he says, Lawrence, he said, I just got a weather alert. And I said, yeah, me too. He said, there's a big storm, it's hitting. I said, it's been raining hard for like 30 minutes already. And that storm came through Ottawa, knocked down over 200 telephone poles. There was another boat on the Ottawa River where we were going to go fishing. It flipped over and a lady died. And I think 7-8 people died in the Ottawa area from that storm that day. And we came within a hair's breadth of being on that river, right? But and technology, we had two different sorts of technology, but that storm was so unusual. It made it from Toronto to Ottawa in 90 minutes.
That is
Wow.
very unusual.
Yeah, that's unheard of. That's unheard of. So there you go. There's things like that happen, right? Things like that happen.
When you're out on the water, do you wear some kind of personal flotation device, Lawrence? Something tells me that you probably don't.
No. My rule on the boat is when the big motor's turned on, everyone has to have a PFD on, a personal flow state. You got to have it on when the big motor starts. When we're 99% of the time, it's just with the electric motor. It's just a big raft moved around slowly with the electric motor. If it's hot, you don't want to wear it. But I wear one of those inflators.
I've got one of those too. Yeah, with the canisters.
Yeah. Now, do you have the auto inflator or the one you pull the
I
ripcord?
have the manual, which means if I get knocked on the head, I'm not awake to pull it up, to pull the,
Me too. I have the same one because if you're in a kayak and you follow the kayak and that thing goes off, poof, and
then you're without a life jacket.
You don't have a life jacket anymore. You can't stuff it back in the sack, right? You're done for the day.
Yeah.
So and when you're kayak fishing, you fall out of the kayak. It happens. So I got that one exactly for that reason. But even if you have an inflator on a boat, you still need to have another life jacket with you because those don't count as PFDs. Yeah.
That's right. Yep. I know that from my dragon boating experiences. So there you go. Let's talk about the writing process for you, Lawrence, with writing this piece. Did you find that to be okay? So first of all, you wrote it before you knew that there was this anthology out in the world. So what is it that prompted you to, like, I don't know, I'm going to use the old analogy of putting pen to paper, although I know you put fingertips to a keyboard, but
yeah. I wrote it, I try to write something every day, maybe about 1,000 words every day.
Wow,
it's like a muscle, you got to keep it up.
Yeah.
And once you do that for months and years, writing is not that hard, right? It sort of just flows. But I always leave it for a week if I can, and then look at it again and then fix all the mistakes, because the first cut, there's always going to be a lot of mistakes and you're going to rewrite a bunch of it. But I didn't. I sent that first cut to Robert, and then he sent it back and he said, we want to publish this. And he sent me back some editorial comments, and he told me he was going to pay me a couple cents a word. So I doubled the length. I think I went from 750 words to 1,500. And I'm thinking, well, if he doesn't like, he'll just make it push back, he'll cut it out, cut stuff out. But I told him, I said, yeah, I added a bit, but no, they kept it all in there. So, instead of $50, I think I made 75 or something.
Woohoo! Woohoo!
It wasn't the money, really. I just wanted to. I thought, well, if it's going to be in a book, I want it to be as good as I can, as good as it can be. So I just kept, chunking away at it and enriching it. And the editors were excellent. They kept coming back and said, Lawrence, what's going on here? Can you add a little more flavor here? So I would, like that walking on the ice back, right? I really wanted to make that as freaky sounding as I could, because I do that. And I have, I remember once, there's this Bay of Quint, and it's notoriously thin ice. It's part of Lake Ontario. And we were out there, it's like 4 a.m, and I had a guide, and he brought me out on the ATV, and he dropped me off with my junk. Like we hooked the sled on the back of the ATV. I sit on the ATV with him. He pulls me out, and we went for 20 minutes. And then he stops, he unhooks my sled, and he goes, okay, I'll be back. And I'm standing there, and I listen to the ATV just slowly disappear, and then I can't hear it anymore. And I said, holy crap, here I am on the Bay of Quinte, frozen Bay of Quinte. If I walk one way, I'm going to walk into Lake Ontario. It's just open water. So I have no idea which way is back to land. And I think, well, I hope that ATV didn't break down. And I'm thinking, I guess I'm just out here. I'll be out here for a long time. No one knows except that guy. And I'm having all these thoughts going through my head, right? And then all of a sudden I hear this zip, and then another. So turns out there's like probably 40 or 50 ice tents all around me, and zippers are opening, and people are cutting holes.
Oh gosh.
I wasn't quite alone as like I thought I was. Good thing I didn't panic or do something silly, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's a good thing you didn't like strip
Take a
naked
pee.
and
Exactly.
try and do a
That's exactly
polar
the
swim
thing I was
somewhere, right?
thinking. Right. Exactly the thing I was thinking. Like, oh, thank God he didn't like strip or anything. Like,
Yeah. All the things that we could do because we think we're alone.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like you got to take off a lot of gear, right? You got to take your coat off, your bib overalls have to come down if you want to take a pee. It's quite a process. So
Yeah. Of course. Obviously that makes total sense. This reminds me of like if anybody's got a cat in their house, it's like if cats can't see you, you're not there.
Right.
Right. And they'll
Yep,
do all
yep,
sorts
yep.
of things. And it's like, yeah, I
I
can
know
see you behind
exactly
the
what you
couch, or I
mean.
know you're
Yep.
there, right? Like,
Yep.
cat's like, as long as I don't see you, you're not there.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I feel a lot when I'm out in the world, is like, I can't see you, so you're not there. There you go.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that's hilarious.
but
So you're
I-
writing something every day, Lawrence. I'm curious about what things you are writing about now. Do you pick a different topic every day? Like what? I don't know. I'm curious about that.
Well, I've been doing this newsletter for about. I started it more seriously. I used to do it like every 3 months or so for the charity I run, and so. But with COVID, I started doing it every week or so because I realized people were stuck at home and they wanted to have something to read, and it got really popular.
Mhm.
So but I realized I couldn't do it every week, so I started doing it every 2 weeks, and then I got some feedback. We did a survey, and people really liked the editorial thing I was putting at the end, so we moved that to the front. And then I thought, well, now, so I got my editorial I write, and then all the news bits, the news links and summaries, and then a little guest piece at the end, someone else's little bit of information.
Mhm.
And so it can be about 12, 13 pages in total. And people, I did a survey, and no one wanted it shorter. No one said, Lawrence, this is too long. And they love it because there's not much out there like it. So now I have to write this editorial, and it's usually about 1,000 to 1,500 words every 2 weeks. So that's got to look good, and it's got to be well researched. And then I put links into my I usually have a couple podcasts, 1 or 2 podcasts that get featured in there, so it's all specific to a topic. And it's very factual, very, very factual. That's what I count on. No fake news, no false news. It's all, here's the evidence, and if you don't believe me, here's some interviews with some experts for all the background knowledge you'd ever want. And so that's good. And then there's other blogs I write for, and magazines. I write for Outdoor Canada magazine as well, and then I write the scripts for Outdoors with Lawrence Gunther. So I had this one podcast called Bluefish Radio, and it's just about the outdoors. And I've interviewed, I think, 360 people, 360 episodes so far in 9 years. And first, people never knew I was blind, and I never told anyone. You do it over the phone. But now everyone does it with technology, so you have to turn the camera on. So I started telling people. But by then, I'd say about halfway through, maybe after 3 or 4 years, everyone knew I was blind, and no one gave a crap because no one ever mentions it, because we don't talk about blindness. We talk about, environmental stuff and fish habitat and what's happening with the fish health and what's happening to angler access and First Nations communities and what are their struggles. Those are the topics we talk about. The fact that I'm blind doesn't matter. Only if someone keeps saying, it's just blind stupidity, and they make those blindisms.
those little microaggressions. Yes.
And I laugh, but I don't call them on it. But But I wanted to start doing another podcast just for youth and other people who are blind, and that's the Outdoors with Lawrence Gunther. So that's where it's all scripted. It's meant to be entertaining, informative, fun, relaxing, and I'm told it is. So it's a 26-minute podcast, comes out every 2 weeks on AMI Audio,
Mm-hmm.
and on, so it's on their audio channel and as a podcast, and it's just it's a total, it's not all made up, but there's facts in there for sure and interesting people, but it's meant to be entertaining. Really, if you don't give a crap about the outdoors, you'll still find it entertaining. I think that's
Okay.
what I hear. And if you're not even blind, you find it entertaining. I'm told as well. So whatever. But you know what? I really, it's the where one place where I talk about blind and being blind, and I share some of my knowledge because I've been doing this outdoor stuff for quite a while, and you don't, when you Google that, you don't find it. There's not many
Mm.
people writing on how to do outdoor stuff as a blind person, so it's just a way to share that. And so I write it, I script it, and then I write articles and about that and stuff too. So
You're very active, Lawrence, and you do a lot of good work. And I just, quickly in our last couple seconds here, maybe you can share with us some platforms that people can find you on if they want to reach out and, I don't know, get your
yeah.
newsletter or check out your podcast.
Yeah, well, if you want to get on the Outdoors with Lawrence Gunther, then go on Apple Podcasts or whoever you want to get on that with, and or if you want to learn more about blind fishing and navigating blind on the water and all my tips about that, I've been doing that blog since 2007. That's blindfishingboat.com. So I made this little plastic boat and I still use it and I still modify it all the time. It talks and squawks and beeps and honks, and it's totally self-drivable as a blind person. And so
Very
that's
cool.
blindfishingboat.com. And if you're interested in the environment stuff, bluefishcanada.ca. And if you want my other podcast, that's bluefishradio.com. And if you just want my stuff about me more and some of the stuff I'm doing, it's Lawrence at lawrencegunther.com. So just if you Google Lawrence Gunther, you'll find all that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. I know that you're going to stick around for the Q&A at the end, and folks can ask questions about all the things that you do or the story that you shared here tonight. But for the moment, you get a little bit of a break while we
right.
bring Niki White into the space. Thanks, Lawrence.
My pleasure.
All right, we're going to introduce Niki in the space in just a moment here, because Niki's story is next for us to listen to. And so we'll say goodbye to Lawrence and bring in Niki. Welcome, Niki. Where are you joining us from this evening?
I'm currently joining you from Utah.
Utah. Wow, wonderful. So you have a story that we're going to listen to momentarily. What's it called, and what do we need to know about the story before we get started?
It's called How Is It You Sing? And if there are any musical theater fans out there, that is a reference to a lyric in the song Greenfinch and Linnet Bird by the late, great Stephen Sondheim, and from the musical Sweeney Todd. And musical theater is a huge part of the story. For those of you who are not musical theater fans, it's not that long. It will pass by quickly, and I hope I've made it entertaining enough that it is not painful to listen to.
Robert, from your perspective, when you heard this story, what was it that that grabbed you about it? So, it must be in the anthology.
Right, yes. So, I mean, I'm not a musical theater connoisseur. I mean, I like musical theater, but I'm definitely not an expert. But I just really liked the title, How Is It You Sing? And I also really liked the writing style, the characters' internal monologues and thoughts and everything. I just really liked the flow of the story and how we got to follow the protagonist through a class. So it might seem very kind of simple, but sometimes I think simplicity is brilliant. So, yes.
There we go. It's a little sampling. So this is about 25 minutes long. So it's nice and digestible. So with that, friends, I'm going to invite you to sit back and listen to How Is It You Sing? And we'll come back and talk with Niki and Robert after. Rick, go ahead and hit play.
How Is It You Sing? By Niki White. Read by Niki White. Content warning, grief. I cannot believe I'm here, actually inside the music building on my college campus. That my ears have just been vigorously assaulted by a trombone doesn't help my already sour, rebellious mood. No, by all means, blow your high F while someone's walking by. It's not like you have control over the instrument. I give the thing an echoing thwack with my cane, receiving a knee-jerk response of, sorry, from the trombonist, who's completely oblivious to my little revenge. It's fine, I mumble automatically, tiredly, because I know since he's a sighted person, encountering an obviously blind person, he's apologizing for being in my way. My ringing ears will probably never occur to him. I slouched past the inconsiderate musician into my classroom, noting, as my cane suddenly glides smoothly across the floor with little thudding whispers as the tip bumps against the cracks, a sound akin to a roller skate on a rink, that it's wooden. The reverberating hiss of the air vents above also tells me this room possesses a high ceiling. Kudos to the architect for an acoustically appropriate space that will ensure we can all tell whether someone's really good, okay, or an embarrassment to themselves. I grudgingly allow that it's better than a carpeted room, as I wander aimlessly in search of a chair. Granny used to say carpet sucked the soul out of a song. I dig my fingers into the rubber grip of my cane hard enough to make it hurt, but it's clearly a pointless distraction. My mind goes right along and dredges up how she'd been the only person who understood my fury that year the practice room was carpeted, and I'd been forced to rely even more stringently on my no. I can't think about that. Won't. My cane hits something that sounds plastic, but echoes slightly. I reach out, and my fingers make contact with the smooth, varnished wooden front of a piano. The air around me feels closed, which indicates the front of the room in spaces like this. Typically, classrooms and lecture halls have a different front of the room feel. The sweeps of my cane become overly wide swings in an even more pitifully transparent attempt to keep me in the here and now, giving a bad name to prior orientation and mobility instructors in my desperation. Sorry, guys. I'll do you proud when there are people around to see my cane skills. Promise. The clink of the tip against metal thankfully jolts me completely from my train of thought, and after confirming the object's a chair, I drag it to the approximate center of the room. After stowing my things underneath the hard metal seat, with the exception of the folder containing my sheet music the class was emailed to bring in, there's nothing left for me to do but wait and ponder how I'm going to get back at Miranda for this. It's the second semester in a row I've been cursed with her, the nosiest roommate on the planet, and how she was left alone with my overly chatty 7-year-old sister Katie, I'll never know. I don't care if I'm allergic. I'm getting a guide dog next year. Then I can get a single. But, apparently, Miranda mentioned I had a pretty singing voice. Curse you, catchy, meaningless, barely ever logically rhymed pop music, which led Katie to expound upon the boxed-up awards at my parents' house with my name and titles of vocal competitions on them. I don't know if she explained that I haven't actually sung in 3 years, but Miranda should have been content with the mystery being solved. I'd always stopped my accidental humming if she commented on it, or I caught myself at it. But somehow, maybe because Miranda thinks that since I'm yoked to so much technology I'll comply to anything on a screen, she put this information into her selfish little head and decided to fill the last free space on my schedule with a musical theater workshop. You would have been waitlisted for the classes you wanted anyway, Miranda had lectured. I could make none of the comebacks I'd wanted to with Katie still in the room, so settled for the logical rebuttal. Good point, but I don't want to be in theater. I'm a terrible actor. But you're a great singer, so things will balance out. That's very sweet. A girl could get a cavity standing next to you, but you don't know I'm a great singer. You know I'm a decent singer and are relying on hearsay. What's hearsay? Katie asked. What you hear someone else say. Oh, that makes sense, but I'm not someone. I know you're not, Kitty Cat, but I was helping you, Tracy. Sure, I said dryly, turning my head toward Miranda's voice, because usually when I help someone, I wait until they go to the bathroom to act on their behalf. The obvious solution to all of this would have been for me to change it, but my mom, back too late from the car with the last box of my stuff, had responded to Katie's pronouncement of Tracy's taking a singing class by giving me a hug and saying how Granny would be so happy, and she'd known I wouldn't just turn my back on 13 years of voice lessons. Plus, when my family had gone, Miranda refused to turn on the talking program that makes my computer, and thereby my schedule, accessible to me. So blindsided, no pun intended, manipulated, unintentionally guilted, and curious in the way you're curious about the details of a car accident to know just how deluded or pretentious my classmates would be, it was inevitable that I'd come for the first class. Of course, I'll be dropping in at the end of the week and telling my flighty cohabitant and Mom and Katie that the workshop just wasn't what I thought it would be, so ultimately I win. The door opens, followed by footsteps clacking on the wood and the screech of a chair being pulled up to the left of mine. If you don't mind my asking, a girl's voice pipes up, did someone help you with the chair? Maybe it's because I'm already on edge, but the abrupt question rubs me the wrong way. It's a common enough association with some sighties that blind equals helpless, and usually I'm cool with explaining where this view's flawed. But seriously, that's the first thing out of this girl's mouth. No, hi, I'm blah blah, what did you bring in for Professor Harper to get a sense of your voice? But instead, are you as needy as I presume you are from stereotypical generalizations and what I believe are true representations in movies? I'm dropping on principle now. Yeah, I say sweetly. Whoever put the piano at the front of the room helped me get oriented, and whoever decided classroom air vent should almost always be placed a little to the right of the ceiling center helped me navigate. Silence, and the me that would have answered differently, politely, in any other class feels a little guilty. Then a perky, I'm Amanda. Tracy. And please get the hint that I don't want to chit-chat. How are you? Amanda gushes, then plows on before I've even opened my mouth. Because I'm feeling sick and want to go home. Fine, though I agree about the going home part. Okay, that had all the politeness of a stampeding elephant. Try again, Trace. I'm sure your nerves will clear up, I say, after a beat. Great, now I'm thinking musically, unsure that it matters whether or not I contribute to the conversation. So, what are you singing? Amanda asks, sounding more like the kindergarten teacher who tries to tempt the shy kid into playing than a nervous girl. Now, what would be the fun in telling you when we have to make introductions? I answer dully. Oh, yeah. She falls blessedly silent after this stunningly witty comeback, and I feel a sharper twinge of guilt. I shouldn't be taking my anger and uneasiness at being here out on her. What if she's new? If she is, she'll soon know I wasn't lying about the intros. Standard, hello, good afternoon, good morning, my name is, and I will be singing, performing. The divas in these workshops adore these moments. Waiting to see if they know the song, whether or not their classmate mimics some famous name who's made the piece what it is today, makes it their own, or is merely the latest person to sing it note for note with no feeling whatsoever. Because it's not bad enough that the only thing for an entire classroom of either opinionated or nervous or cocky or hijacked, okay, that last one probably only applies to me, people to do is hang off your every word. They have to judge you too. The room quickly fills up and Amanda finds others to chatter with. I don't really pay attention again until a woman's voice says, "I see all of you got my email. Good. Now, how many of you have been in a musical theater workshop before?" Apparently, I'm not the only one to raise my hand. It was during a summer when my voice teacher was playing the fairy godmother in a production of Cinderella, because Professor Harper murmurs, "Okay, a couple of you. Well, because this class is about performing, we're just going to jump right in. The songs you brought in today will be the songs you work on for at least a quarter of this semester, unless you brought in something strictly to show off, in which case you'll be picking something else that can challenge you at least marginally." This gets a laugh. "This way, you'll already have a song you hopefully enjoy singing, and one that's already completely memorized, so half the battle will be over. Now, when you finish, I'll be giving you a few comments on how to improve your performance, which I do want you to work on for next week, but please don't take these too seriously. All of you will have something to improve on." With that, she takes roll, introduces the pianist, Eric, who arrives after 6 of the 9 names have been confirmed present, and has us stand where we are to sing a few warm-ups. They consist of vowel exercises, the 5 sounds A, E, I, O, and U, sung on 3 notes, both up and down the scale, and lip trills, blowing out air so that your lips pucker up and vibrate, like a kid making a motor sound as they play with cars. Peers who aren't loud enough are probably self-conscious, or struggle with the lip trills, producing either loud puffs of air or spitting sounds that probably contain saliva in their frustration. After about 10 minutes of that, we're told to sit back down and asked if anyone feels brave enough to go first. Only the hissing air vents respond to the gauntlet Professor Harper has thrown down, which is fine by me. I'm rattled. Those warm-ups were supposed to be more challenging, damn it, and rooting for this class to be a bunch of wallflowers. The more times taken up by silence, the less time we'll have to get through everyone. The prospect of dropping the workshop without ever having to sing a note is thrilling, and one I hadn't considered. "I will," says a nasal male voice, and I wonder how bad a person it makes me for imagining thwacking him the way I did the trombone. "Lovely," Professor Harper replies. "Hand over your music to Eric, and before you start, tell us your name and what you'll be singing. Just those 2 things, nothing about the song." His name is Travis, and unfortunately, he'll be singing Stephen Sondheim's Not While I'm Around, a beautiful musical theater piece about a boy wanting to protect his guardian from a character who he thinks is a villain. I say unfortunately because Travis sings the way he talks, in a nasal whine that mangles the melody, makes certain words unclear, and turns the high notes into cat yowls. When he's done, and we've applauded stiffly, Professor Harper goes through some pronunciation exercises with him that get his lyrics out of the nose somewhat. This means he has to hold his nose a lot, and the song regains some of the sweetness Sondheim intended. I guess Travis makes other people think they have nothing to be nervous about, because the next person to take the floor is Amanda. Her song fits the rude chatterbox impression I formed of her. Stephen Schwartz's Popular is a shallowly worded piece wherein a popular girl sings about how she can help an unpopular girl conform. But Amanda either cannot, or has not, learned to support the sound by using her diaphragm. When you do, breathing in so that your stomach fills with air, your ribs expand and stay expanded until you take your next breath, and all the muscles below your belly button contract, that includes the main pelvic one, you can actually sound as loud as you would with the help of a microphone if you wanted to. I can tell she isn't doing this, because Amanda sounds not only like she's talking at a regular volume, but is running out of air scarily fast throughout the bouncy bubblegum tune. Eric kindly waits for her to pant and gasp in lungfuls of air so she can continue, but the comedy that's the crux of the song is lost by the time she finishes. Professor Harper starts sorting this out by having her press her stomach against a wall, keeping it out and resisting against the hard surface so nothing falls in on itself. If it sounds like hard going, that's because it is, and Amanda sounds tired and winded when they're through. Next up, called from the roster, because I guess people are starting to feel daunted now, are 4 girls and 1 guy who sing respective Disney songs. A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes, Just Around the River Bend, Belle Reprise, Someday My Prince Will Come, and Be Prepared. The characters represented by the 4 female soloists are all known for having beautiful and immediately recognizable voices. So the girls try their best to mimic the professional singers found on the original movie soundtracks. The villain's vocal classification is just a touch too low for the student trying to pull it off. Professor Harper talks a lot to the girls about ways to make the pieces their own, emphasizing different words and showcasing different emotions than the originators. Because if someone wants to hear someone sounding exactly like the original Belle, they won't hold auditions. They'll just hire the original Belle. The guy gets information about changing his song's vocal register so he can sing the low notes more like a human and less like a dying car battery, and the trio of student, professor, and pianist spends some time finding out what vocal type he actually is. More handsome prince material than dastardly villain. I don't think he's pleased with this fact, but maybe he doesn't know just how many songs are available to him. Professor Harper clearly has a rapport with the penultimate student, because instead of saying another name when the reluctant Prince Charming sits back down, she quips, "Back for more internal pain." "I'm a music major. Life is pain," a male voice returns, with just enough of a mock melodramatic tone to draw a few giggles from every female student but me, and Professor Harper. Their mirth lasts longer than the joke warranted, so apparently he's attractive. I'm waffling about whether to classify him as the truly pretentious peer. Princey would have filled that slot before this guy opened his mouth, but then he gives the title of his piece. Unless you want to humiliate yourself years after the workshop has ended, because no one will forget you butchering a gorgeously passionate, musically strenuous song where the singer's required to be 2 people in a fatal struggle. You save a masterpiece like Frank Wildhorn's The Confrontation for the end of the semester. The breath control that was Amanda's problem has to be so precise that performers have been known to record one or the other parts so the audience doesn't witness an onstage burnout. As Eric plays the opening notes and chords, I'm betting I'll know exactly where he'll slip up, but am distracted due to being enveloped in the warm cocoon of melody pouring out of Golden Tenor Guy's mouth. He soon changes from emoting love, grief, and desperation to the harsh back and forth of the dueling charismatic men, but the shift doesn't break the spell he initially wrought. He has the type of voice that, if he knows what he's doing, and does he ever, causes shivers down the spine and more discreet places, earns awards, and makes you think that as long as this voice sang about world domination, you'd be willing to hear it out. According to Professor Harper, who puts up a good pretense of being unmoved, I can tell by the slight hitch in her breath before she critiques, though she's given time to pull herself back to a professional versus audience demeanor while applause and cries of "Dude!" pervade the air. He keeps his jaw too taut. By the time they've made some progress in getting it to hang motionless throughout the first verse, freeing up the sound even more, I can tell the class is unwilling to applaud, unwilling to acknowledge that the work, for now, has come to an end. I, meanwhile, am swallowing back tears, knowing in my gut there was a time when I too could sing with such technical purity and emotional abandon, but unable to pinpoint precisely when. It saddens and terrifies me until a nasty little voice in my head begins to stir and I rein it back. "And last but not least, Tracy McDonnelly," Professor Harper proclaims, the quickest to shake off any stupor she's been left in. "Do you need help getting—" "I got it!" As I move to stand in front of the piano, I've heard everyone else walk up to it enough that I can find my way by counting my steps. Handing over my binder before I turn my back on the instrument, my mind isn't on the song. Mostly it's scrabbling like a panicked rat in a trap, because I can't follow up Golden Tenor. That's just mean. Why didn't pleasant-sounding laymen like the wannabe princesses gush over him more? They could have eaten up more of my time, all of it, for that matter. That would have been great. But the part of my brain that isn't trying to dodge the singing bullet is running over a mental checklist. Roll your hip bones so your back is not quite straight and the pelvic bone is tucked, knees slightly bent, hips level with knees and shoulders, head level. Drop the jaw so it hangs there, only moving for letters like M. Breathe from the diaphragm. Keep the core muscles contracted and ribs out. Check the positions of the tongue, throat, palate, chest. Exhale as little as possible and allow no air to escape from the nose. Ignore the thought that your brain will explode. I deliver my intro spiel and nod once that part's over so that Eric knows I'm ready to start. I can't ruin my setup by speaking to him, and even if I wanted to break that rule of singer-accompanist interaction, my increased heart rates demanding the bulk of my attention. The opening chords make something loosen inside me. And just before I allow what hints of the melody that are provided in the introduction to burst out into the world, I remember Granny saying one of the worst things about the cancer was that she'd have to guess at whose music I would make my own when she was gone. Lyrics to the song that I would have sung at her funeral, had I been brave enough to go, come out hesitant at first, the memory jolting me a little. But I regroup quickly, gather equilibrium, and start to put heart into the phrases. The melding of the rhythm, words, and pitches create a moment where I'm wholly content. The song and the sound are too beautiful for me to feel otherwise. And despite the exertion of my body, the song sounds and feels effortless to produce. I feel alive and complete in a different way than how I would feel singing when Granny was alive, but the sensation is good enough that I don't think I'd mind a recurrence. When I finish, in the beat of silence that exists between the ending notes and the applause of my peers, I feel as though I'm becoming reacquainted with reality. Somehow, it seems a less hostile place than the one I briefly ascended from during the song. "Where's that from?" Golden Tenor asks before Professor Harper can begin her critique. "It's a trunk song. The composer and lyricist just wrote it," I say, oddly breathy, and clear my throat. "It never got put into a story. Oh, and a trunk song is what they'd call songs like that, because they used to just sit around in trunks if people didn't use them in anything." In other words, the piece was adrift, like me without Granny. The only person in my family who'd understood how good it felt to spill the sounds that lodged in your head, the fragments of stories that suited you in the moment, out into the world. A pause, then Golden Tenor says abruptly, "Yes." You nodded, I guess. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. How dare you not know how to act around a blind person, having presumably never met one before? This gets a laugh, even from Eric. "Have you taken lessons before?" Professor Harper asks hopefully, probably only now registering she'll have to explain things a little differently to me. Years ago, but I remember a lot of the technical stuff. "Do you know what I mean by, tongue, height?" "Shh. There, frightened Sidey. If I had no clue what you were talking about, the worst thing that would happen is that I'd have to touch my own tongue." I say I do with enough authority to turn her back into a teacher again, and am able to make some corrections so that the strong muscle almost stays completely wide and unmoving. My tongue feels sore by the time I'm allowed to go back to my chair and pack up. I coast out the door with the feeling that I'd like nothing more than to curl up in bed for an hour. But amid the tiredness are surges of adrenaline, a sense of anticipation to see how much more I will accomplish by this time next week, and there's a smile somewhere inside me that's slowly building up the courage to take shape. It isn't until I'm back in one of the room's provided metal chairs the following week that I recollect my desire to drop the workshop. But like Miranda said, I would have had to wait for the other classes I'd wanted, and there was every likelihood I'd never get a spot with classes already started. After some soul scouring, I come to the surprising conclusion that the logic doesn't make me bristle as much as it did before.
Okay, welcome back, friends. We got Niki in the space with us, and Robert's returning with us. So, Niki, you also narrated this particular piece. So, I'm curious, as I do a lot of voiceover work and this kind of thing, is it awkward to hear yourself in your own voice repeat your story?
A little bit, surprisingly not as awkward as I thought it would be. I guess because I have had more experiences listening to myself, just not myself narrate. So it's sort of like, oh, this is a little familiar, if a little bit different. So
I thought you did an excellent job. So, if you're not narrating already, I think you should do that. But maybe you can tell us the process for you, because did you memorize it? Were you reading Braille? Did you have a screen reader? How were you reading it? How did you make that accessible?
I was reading Braille from a note taker, and I had practiced reading it multiple times, so I knew roughly where I wanted to take breaths, how I wanted everything to flow. I had a very good idea of how this character's internal voice sounded in my head, and that she was very pithy and very very quippy.
Yeah,
And
quippy.
that yeah, very quippy. And that I knew I really wanted to bring it across, and that I spent a good few weeks trying out the character voices and literally recording them and figuring out, okay, do I like that one? Do I like that one? Is this actually easy to do or not easy to do? So I prepped.
I think that, yeah, go ahead, Robert.
When I heard the story with the screen reader, I liked it, but when I heard her narration of it, I'm like, holy crap, I love it.
Yeah, it's excellent. Excellent narration. Where did you get the inspiration? I mean, I asked this about Lawrence too, right? Was this scenario something that you had experienced? Was it pure fiction, a combination of the two?
A combination of the two. I have actually been singing now for good, oh gosh, let's see. Okay, let's just say 20 something years.
Wow.
I've had voice lessons with the same teacher now for 17 years as of last month. We were kind of just in awe of that when it came up on one of our calendars. Oh, this is the anniversary of the first lesson we ever had together.
Oh.
But so I've had that experience, and I've been in choirs and musical theater workshops, and have done some community theater as well. So there were a lot of things to draw on, and some of it is based on a mix and match of all of those things. As far as what I wanted to do with this particular story, I had come up with the idea for a creative writing workshop that I had taken, and it was kind of based off of this piece that we had written earlier in the year, where we just had to write a one-page little just snippet of what our first days of the class would be like. And I wrote it from the point of view of a blind character, basically having it be literally what my experience would be like, and making it very true to life, but making it very quippy and very fun in that same style. And so I knew I wanted to try something with that, but with a longer piece. And I don't know how the singing really came into it. It was just a very organic aspect of it. And once I sort of knew, oh, this is going to be about musical theater, I had fun picking out the songs and knowing I wanted to make it accessible, all of the aspects of the songs that were chosen, what it's like to be a singer, what it's like to be a blind singer, how much you can pick up specifically from just listening to things. I think a lot of people maybe think that, okay, singing is easy and there's always this stereotype of blind people being musicians, but what does that actually entail from the perspectives of someone just having to learn it and critique it as well?
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite moments actually comes right at the very beginning, in the first couple of minutes of the story, where you bump into the musician with your cane, and it's like the assumption is this person thinks, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in your way, and you're like, shut that thing up.
Yeah, right? Yep.
That is so true to life in so many ways, where it's people are apologizing for being in your way, or apologizing for
Yep.
the whatever they think is going on, and no.
Yeah, I don't need your apology, I just need you to shut the heck up.
Yes.
Or move.
Yes.
Move. Yeah, or
Yeah.
move. That's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
Or
But
move.
I it made me chuckle. In your writing process, Niki, like, what was that like for you? Are you somebody who is a creative writer on a regular basis? Or are you somebody who, saw this opportunity for this, anthology and thought, okay, I'll write something? I'm curious about your process.
I am a writer by profession. I'm trying to get traditionally published actually at the moment. So please, everyone listening, send me some good vibes while I am hunting for a literary agent. But so this story I'd written essentially in trying to learn more about literature, being an English major. And I actually had tried to get it published many times before this anthology came along. The teacher that had, the professor that had basically gotten the assignment said that I should try and get it published. I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. I'll, take everyone's edits into account, and then I'll try it. And I was getting no nibbles on it at all. So I stuffed it in a drawer, metaphorically speaking. And then Robert had, I think, actually written to me on Facebook, because we were Facebook friends at the time, just telling me about the anthology. And I was like, oh my God, my little story about singing might actually have a little bit more of a shot. And so I immediately sent it in, and was really not ambivalent about it, but I'd gotten a lot of rejections on it before. So I was, just kind of having a que sera feeling about it, and then it got accepted, which was lovely. But as far as the process goes for, I guess, kind of, actually no, that's all I'm going to say about that.
That's great. I folks in this space have heard me say many times that I find writing stuff very difficult, and it is a as an artist, you have to create content. But I struggle because I feel like I don't have the words. I feel like I don't have the format to, build in the dramatic moments and the dramatic action and all those things. And I continue to learn, and VocalEye's provided some great workshops to build up creative writing and stuff. So that's been a real journey for me, but I find it so hard. So, I mean, you're a professional writer. Do you still find that difficult to write something, or does it just like flow out of you?
It honestly can depend on the day. Some days I'm writing 500, 700, over 1,000 words, and there's no issue and it's great. Some days it's, okay, I wrote 30 words today. Yay. And that can always just be challenging. And I'm finding more and more it's about how much you know about the story and how much you're finding your way through the story, or whatever it is you're writing, even if it's a blog post or something.
Right.
Figuring out what you want to say and how much do you actually want to know going in? Because I know some people don't want to know where they're going, especially where fiction is concerned. That kind of takes the fun out of it if they know too much. And that is definitely my philosophy. I need to know the ending, the rough ending and the rough beginning. Everything else, I want the characters to inform.
That's an interesting strategy. I know we've got some folks in our audience who are writers, and when we get to our group Q&A, maybe they'll have some questions of all of you in this space, because it's one thing to be a writer, it's one thing to be a published writer, it's one thing to have a publishing company and a literary agent backing you, it's another thing to self-publish. Have you self-published anything, Niki?
Technically, no. I do have a few things on my website that are basically because I could not get them published anywhere, and it's been about 10 years or so since I have written them and tried. I've got like, okay, I'm just going to put these up there because they need some sort of home, and maybe they'll get some people interested, but nothing in terms of fiction. All of them are very much various essay pieces.
Okay. I mean, that writing is also very interesting. So where can folks find your work if they want to check out what you're writing?
You can go to nikiwhite.net, and Niki is spelled with just one K for those of you who do not have any braille to inform you of the spelling, or don't feel like literally going letter by letter on whatever form of screen reader or voiceover you're using to see my name. So writing 2 Ks will get you, I don't know what it'll get you actually. Now I'm curious.
yeah. We'll try that later. That'll be our homework for the night. What happens if I Google Niki White with 2 Ks?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Niki White with 1 K, nikiwhite.net, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I will tell you this, other artists and performers and writers will tell you this, that creating your own content is a must if you want to, one, continue your skill, two, try and get things out into the world. How long have you been writing, Niki, and what do you see were your biggest barriers?
Let's see. Well, okay, I've been writing pretty much since I was a teenager, and that just sort of started with fan fiction because it's fun playing in other people's sandboxes, and you don't have to do a lot of the work because the world's already made. And then that sort of continued to become more and more serious. I actually have a master's degree in creative writing, and as far as the barriers, one that immediately comes to mind, and one that I actually mentioned in the sort of query letter for this anthology, was it can literally be hard to submit something somewhere because of however the website has been coded. And you literally either can't fill in certain boxes, or you can fill in all the boxes, but you can't push the submit button.
There you go. Yep.
And that is infuriating when you've done all the work, especially when you're dealing with longer pieces like a novel, and people maybe want 3 chapters of it, or 10 pages of it, or 25 pages, or however much they want. And you get everything set up, and you get it so that it's in the little edit box, and the formatting is okay, so like you don't have weird issues so that there's only one word on each line or something, and then you can't hit the button. Not to say that it's not annoying when you are dealing with a shorter piece, but I feel it's very irritating that the more you try to stretch your wings and the more you try to grow as any type of creator, if you literally can't get your work out there due to no fault of your own, it's very annoying. And then there's just being able to write fiction, period, having people want your fiction. And Lawrence touched on this to a degree, that people more often than not want memoirs from blind and visually impaired people, because that's mostly what they've been given. And yeah, there's a place for that. There's always going to be a place for that. But can we write about, we have the right to write about everything else that we would like to, that interests us, that made us want to be writers, or whatever it is we want to do in the first place. And yet kind of getting past that is tricky. And it's very ironic now with everyone calling for, we want people that are underrepresented. And yet there's still this weird stigma is the word that's coming to mind. I'm not sure if it's the right one, where disabilities are concerned.
Yeah, other folks in underrepresented communities or who are equity seeking are sometimes much farther ahead than folks with disabilities.
Right.
For lots of systemic reasons. That's a whole other episode that we could talk about.
Yeah.
That stuff as well. Well, Niki, thank you. I know you're going to stick around for the joint Q&A at the end, and I think in this moment we'll just thank you and bless you. I guess the term is bless and release, but you're not being released. You're coming back. You're just going in hiding for a few minutes.
Yes, I'm being blessed and put on hold.
Blessed and put on hold. I love it. And we're going to bring
love
Tessa into the space. So Tessa's square is going to appear in a moment here. Wonderful. We've got a square for Tessa. So welcome, Tessa.
Thank you very much.
Tessa, where are you joining us from this evening? You're in the future. I know you are.
Yes, it's way past my bedtime. I'm in Thunder Bay, Northwestern Ontario.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Past your bedtime. I hear you loud and clear. But certainly last but not least in this space, you've got a story for us, and I'm wondering if you want to set it up because it'll be the last story we listen to this evening.
Well, I will tell you that probably 98% of this story is true.
Okay. And the story is entitled, I don't want to say it wrong, but it's Mishipizheu.
Mishipizheu?
Mishipizheu?
Mishipizheu.
Okay, awesome. Robert, is there anything you want to add to set up this story before we listen to it?
Yes. So I love metaphors. Pretty much like if you give me a good metaphor, I will just fall in love with you. So this story is like a giant metaphor for the disparate experience, where people look down upon us, and they don't trust us or believe us. So I think that you'll connect with the real message behind the story.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have our listeners witness this story this evening. So with that being said, I'll invite folks to sit back and have a listen, and we'll come back and talk with Tessa and Robert after we have a listen. It's about 7 minutes long, this one, friends. So Rick, when you're ready, please hit play.
Mishipizheu by Tessa Soderberg. I'm going to go to the water, Sarah said. Go for it, her sister Bonnie said. Just be careful, it's pretty rocky. Sarah nodded. Using her hiking stick to feel her way, she followed the sound of the waves to the water's edge. While her sister threw sticks farther up the beach for their 3 dogs, Sarah squatted, totally absorbed in the sounds of Lake Superior. She couldn't see the water, but after a lifetime of questions, Bonnie had developed the skills of a landscape painter when it came to describing things. Sarah could imagine the flakes and slivers of ice tossed on slate-gray water, the lapping waves, and the far-off shape of Mishipizheu, the sleeping giant, against the sky. Hey, sis! What's the giant doing? He's giving you the finger for asking stupid questions, Bonnie called. He's fog-covered, just a shadow in the distance. There's a skin of ice out, but otherwise he's just hibernating as always. Sarah nodded. She had seen the sleeping giant once, years ago when they'd visited the park. Someone had gone to a great deal of trouble to create a plaster sculpture of him, which she'd been allowed to run her hands over. She had been amazed by how human a peninsula of rock could seem. It saddened her that the sculpture was now locked behind glass, where it could only be seen, not experienced. She could imagine him out there in the icy waters of Superior, brooding over his buried silver. She listened to the muted crackle of newborn ice that fizzled to nothing in the sub-freezing water. It was a soft static sound, like frying. Above it, she heard the clink and clatter of glassware as more substantial bits of ice were rattled together like dishes on a badly balanced tray. Every wave created a symphony of glass, and she wished she'd brought something along to record the music. Splash, splash, splash. Sarah jumped, then turned her head to find the origin of the sound. It was a swimming noise, the sound of something, someone coming. "Bonnie!" she called. "Bonnie, something's in the water!" She leapt to her feet and backed away, dropping her stick and stumbling over a boulder as she did so. On hands and knees, she scrambled away from the water's edge in sheer panic. Too many childhood evenings spent with her sisters in front of late-night television while they described in full detail the monsters who reached out of the fog, or out from under the bed. She saw Tolkien's tentacled watcher rising out of the depths to grab her. She smelled fish, as though something from the deep had stirred up the stink. Sarah had too much imagination not to flee. "There's nothing there," Bonnie called, hurrying over, the dogs bounding and barking around her. "Honest, there's nothing." "It sounded like someone swimming. You know, heavy splashes like you make doing the front crawl. I swear it sounded like someone was in the water. And the smell, I swear I smelled something." Bonnie laughed. "The only thing in the water is water, little waves tumbling along the beach here." The splashes came again, and Sarah pointed silently, following their progress with her hand. "Waves," Bonnie said. "Just little waves. They come around the point in groups like that, I guess. Nothing out there at all. Besides, who in their right mind would be swimming this time of year? The bears are all in bed, and the moose have better things to do, and people, though stupid, probably aren't that stupid." Sarah laughed. "Well, they do that polar bear plunge thing every year, but I guess you're right. Just waves." She patted the dogs as they brushed against her on their way to the water. She listened to the clatter of pebbles under their feet, followed by snorts, snuffles, and sneezes as they lapped at the waves. "Remember the sea monster from that book about the Edmund Fitzgerald? Maybe he's out there stirring the waters with his tail looking for lunch. Look hard. See anything sort of snake-like out there? He's like the Loch Ness monster, I think. I wonder if they're related." "Love amongst the sea monster? You're going to start a monster dating service?" Sarah laughed and stepped cautiously towards the water. "Sure, then they can scare each other instead of scaring me." "You don't really believe in that, do you?" "Why not? Just because I can't see the giant doesn't mean he's not there." "But I can see him." "Yeah, but how credible a witness are you? Don't forget the author of that book claims a handful of trappers, a bishop, and a ship's captain all saw the sea monster. Who knows, maybe there really is such a thing. And maybe tomorrow you'll be a sketch artist just like me." Sarah listened as Bonnie stepped closer. "Here's your stick," Bonnie said. "Are you ready to go yet?" "In a minute or two. I wish I'd brought my digital recorder. The ice sounds amazing. I need to record it. Otherwise, no one will believe what I'm hearing." "Okay, I'll take the mutts and run up the beach a bit. Give me a yell when you're ready to go." Sarah listened to the jingle of dog tags as they faded into the distance. She strained her ears, but all she could hear was the soft hiss of ice and the murmur of waves on the rocky shore. She wondered if Bonnie could see her from where she had gone. She wanted to call out, to be sure she wasn't totally alone. Splash, splash, splash. But it's only waves. Splash, splash, splash. A heavy stink of fish, all scaly and slick, filled her nostrils. She wasn't alone. Terror told her that. Water splashed her cheek and she turned away. On hands and knees she started to scramble away from the shore. Splash, splash. Something caught at her ankle, and she screamed.
Kind of got a little ... kind of ending to it a little bit. So Tessa, you started by saying that this story was mostly true. So did you experience something like this, or true to who?
A friend of mine and I used to go snowshoeing on the ice, And I love the sound of the ice, listening to it, all the creaks and groans and all the different sounds that it makes. And one day we were on shore and I could hear this splashing, and I was positive that there was something out there. And she said, no, it's just waves. So presumably it was just waves, but there is a legend. Mishipizheu is a creature known to the Anishinaabe people of this area.
Mm-hmm.
And I had recently read The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by L. Andra Warner, a local writer, and she had a whole paragraph on the monster and on the various sightings over the years. And that kind of stuck with me. I don't necessarily think I thought it was the monster at that time, but later when I got home, it just sort of turned out that way.
Mm-hmm. What about your process in terms of writing this piece? Are you somebody who, like Lawrence and like Niki, are avid writers and are constantly writing stuff? Or are you somebody who saw the submission request for Artificial Divide and thought, I'll see how far I can come up with something?
I've been a member of the Northern Ontario Writers Workshop for on and off for the last probably 30 years, I guess, something like that. And Susan Olding was our writer in residence, and she was the one who actually made me aware of Robert's call. And she had done a critiques of our work. And one of the stories I had submitted to her was a novel that I had been working on. I tend to write more novels than short stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been participating in NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. Basically, I try to do it every year. Some years I write a full novel, some years I write 2 words. And I had written a novel I was working on about a blind woman who was going to serve as cook for a dig in the Badlands of Alberta. And how she arrives at the bus depot, her ride isn't there. She ends up getting a ride out there and finds that everybody is deathly ill with food poisoning. She's got no cell service. She's stuck with a satellite phone that she doesn't know how to use. And so, it's one of those challenges that you sometimes find yourself with.
Yeah, the pickle you got to get yourself out of.
Dealing with other technology that isn't accessible.
Is that a novel that you've published or something that you're continuing to work
not yet.
on?
I'm still working on it.
Sounds like Robert's got to get you all connected with some literary agents, because it sounds like he knows some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to. So
Yeah, for sure. Let's Tessa, have you got a platform, like a blog or a website or someplace where people can reach out to you if they want to experience more of your work?
No, I don't at this point. Not really. I just plug along.
You just plug along. I know I'm like that too. I always say to folks, you won't find me because I don't have a website, but this is what I do, kind of thing. So I appreciate that, how difficult it is to put those pieces together. Maybe let's take an opportunity to invite Lawrence back into the space and Niki back into the space, and we'll all just chat a little bit about the experiences that you've had with this process. And this is an opportunity from our friends in the audience, if you would like to ask questions of our guests, of the writing process, about opportunities that you might have to get involved in maybe being a part of the next anthology that's happening, possibly, or just to share about questions that you had about stories, or what really resonated, because there are things that resonated in all of these stories for me big time. So I really like to hear your experiences of what you've listened to tonight. So if you can use the raise your hand function, that'll be the most accessible way for me to catch you all. And in the meantime, we'll continue our chit chat with the five of us in the space here. Robert, I'm curious from your perspective in terms of the anthology. What you had mentioned at the top was that putting the stories in a particular order was really important.
Right.
And so we played these stories in the order that they would have appeared in the anthology. Obviously, we didn't play all the stories in the anthology, but these ones are played in order as they would appear in the anthology. So can you talk to us about how you curated that and what the importance was of the order?
Yeah, sure. So how I curated the anthology. So the stories take you through a sort of a progression, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The first batch of stories, it's more akin to sort of uh, getting acquainted with the blind characters, if you will. The stories aren't um, very plot heavy, they're more character driven. And then
Mm-hmm.
as you get further on into the anthology, then you'll start to hit the story issues and the metaphors and things like that. So
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a lineup of hands here, so I'm just gonna create a little speakers list. So we've got Megan, and then we've got Lori, and then we've got Sean and Christy, and we got Tilo, and we've got Carrie. So let's start with Megan. Megan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and share your questions or
I
your comments.
love the story. I did miss one of the stories, but the rest of them were awesome, especially with a monster. I love that. Actually, I wrote a story myself. I haven't finished it yet, but it's really good. It's called it's called the Snow Warrior. Like it has about 3 things. Okay. It's really, really awesome. And I like the AEIOU, like stomach against the wall. I did that too when I was doing music classes. And yeah. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thanks, Megan. Maybe one day we'll be able to hear your story, or it'll be published in an anthology.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
And I would just like to quickly say that that for any writers that are looking to submit to an anthology, if you are rejected, it does not mean that you're a terrible writer.
Mm-hmm.
Anthologies are completely subjective. So you could write the greatest piece of all time, and for whatever reason, the editor doesn't like your genre or something of that nature. So
I think that's a really important point to put out there, Robert, because it's so easy to get discouraged, right?
Yes.
Tessa, Lawrence, Niki, were any of you feeling discouraged when you submitted to the anthology, or did you just say, like, you know what, I put it out into the universe, it is what it is?
I didn't feel discouraged, mostly because I'd already gotten rejections from all these different magazines.
Right, you were used to it.
Like, yeah, this is fine. And again, it was always, I knew that it wasn't necessarily anything to do with me as a writer or the story. It just wasn't what they were looking for at the time, or they filled up their quota. And it is very disheartening to get the like, thank you for submitting your piece. Unfortunately, this is not who we are, or unfortunately, we do not think it's well, then why are you thanking me then? You're just, it's such a courtesy thing, and it's annoying. But
Yeah.
I was pretty okay with it. I have recently gotten just a little discouraged with querying the novel that I'm trying to get an agent for, and I've gotten some rejections from some agents that I thought we would work pretty well together for this book and for other things that I want to publish. And so, it's a little disheartening, but you can, take some time to feel disheartened, go and eat your favorite comfort food, and then, for every rejection, there's so many stories of well-known, tons of people in the creative spheres that have gotten so many rejections, and look at where they are now. And sometimes that's hard because it's like, well, they had this happen to them years ago when it was easier to get discovered than it is now. And I'm saying that partly from, yes, I have spiraled into that lovely flume ride of really being annoyed at every single person that has ever achieved success.
Join the club.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, as an actor, I know rejection well. So, okay, let's just take another hand and we'll continue the conversation, friends. So let's go to Lori, and Lori can unmute, and then Sean and Christy, you're up next.
Tammy Grennan has left to me.
Okay, Lawrence, I really liked your story because I like being in the outdoors. I like to go hiking and everything. So hearing your ice story of fishing was pretty hilarious, and everything. So I'll have to go and find your podcast because I do like the outdoors.
Yeah, well, you have to send me some story ideas and give me an email and tell me more about what you're doing in the outdoors. Maybe we'll have you on the podcast, because always looking for people doing cool crap in the outdoors, and and people just do it. They don't think about it. They just do it, and and keep it. Don't think about sharing it. But there's so many great stories that have to be told and need to be told about this, because it's a way of life that's not well appreciated or understood. And like I said, you Google that, you don't find much on that one.
No, and I belong to an organization called Bay Area Outreach Recreation Program, and we do ventures and outings, and we do a lot. I've done a lot of stuff with them in the last 22 years of my life.
Nice. Well, you should maybe write some stories about it and put some of the.
I'm not a very good writer. I'm a terrible speller.
Oh, well.
Oh, the spelling part can be fixed easily, right?
Yeah, they got editors for that.
Awesome.
Can be.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lori. Let's go to Sean and Christy. I'm thinking it might be Christy because I know Christy's a writer, but I could be surprised.
No, that's Christy.
It's me. Not that Sean is not. Well, no, he's not a writer. No. He's a coder. I was going to comment on the fact that like a lot of so I write a lot of creative nonfiction, so they're true, but they present as fiction because they have dialogue. But if you know me and you know my exes, it's pretty true. Anyhow, my stories don't necessarily, like, they don't say my ex who is blind and who uses a talking iPhone. It just goes on about my ex sent me a text and blah blah. And I've had people reading my stories. I've been on internet writing workshop for on and off for the last 15 years. And people would stop writing, like, they'd read something like, I was helping my ex shop for a triathlon, and they would stop reading and just go, wait, he's blind. What do you mean? I'm like, this story is about a prick and an ex-girlfriend who's a doormat. That is it. Right. It has nothing, we just happen to be blind.
Right.
And I've had people just stop, like, just not even focus on the story, because how can this guy be shopping for a Speedo for a triathlon? I'm like, no, the point is he wanted me to choose the Speedo, and he asked me, how do I look in it? Because I can see and he can't.
You already get the answer.
Yeah.
So
That's funny.
yeah. So,
Hilarious.
I've written a lot of stuff like that, and it's been well received, but it's always the hurdle of just blind guys can be pricks too.
Mhm.
And
And girls.
yeah.
And non-binaries.
Yep.
And I'll be pricks.
Yes. Well, exactly. Right. I also wrote one where one of my exes has a very interesting fetish, but again, nobody got past the blind guy with a fetish. What do you mean? I'm like, yes, they're all saints. They're all priests and monks and all that.
God.
Anyway, but I really do love in terms of my process. I write what I know, but it's all about showing versus telling.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people, when they say they're stumbling with process, a lot of people who say they're not writers, it's because they're trying to tell the story and they're trying to tell the reader what they think the reader will find interesting. And if you just show them how you feel, then it comes through. Right. So that's what I
think that's a really important thing to share, because I know that that's my battle, is that I'm used to, like, I could write you a technical manual because it's telling you what to do, but I have a hard time with the showing piece.
That's right. So I mean, that's a big part of what I teach as an English teacher, is like, okay, you just told me about that, tell me, how did it feel? Right. And I think that's why, like, my best friend won't read my writing because she says it feels like she's reading my diary. But I'm like, well, that's a good thing, because then you're feeling what I want you to feel. Like, you're actually hating my ex-boyfriend, which is awesome. That is, I had a girl at Starbucks. I self-published a book in 2017, a memoir. And I had a girl at Starbucks. I was ordering my Starbucks and she was talking to her colleague and going, I hate this guy, Brogan. Like, you got to read this book. I'm like, you're talking about Brogan Bites? And she's like, yeah, he's just an asshole. I'm like, yeah, that's my ex and that's my book. But I was so happy because I'm like, yes, okay, that's the feeling I wanted to convey, right? He's probably a good guy to somebody else, just not to me.
Right? That's always what happens with exes. Yeah. Thank you.
So anyway, I applaud all of you guys. Good on you for putting yourselves out there. And it's cool to be a writer. I love being a writer.
Yep.
It doesn't pay the bills, but it's a great thing.
For Lawrence and for Niki, and well, I guess for all of you, for Robert and for Tessa, did what Christy say about the showing versus telling, does that resonate with any of you?
100%.
Yeah.
I remember this teacher years ago. I heard this teacher say, "Tell me I forget, show me I'll remember, involve me and I'll understand."
Right. That sounds like it's a tattoo. It's a needle print on somebody's wall somewhere,
Oh yeah, maybe a pillow.
Yeah, I love it. How about for you, Tessa? Did that resonate with you?
Yeah, very much so. I think it's important to get your emotions and involved and show people what the experience is, rather than just telling them and letting them sort of work out their own details, because then it isn't necessarily real to them.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you that I probably am not sure, if I were to write something, that I could tell the difference between show versus tell, because I'm so new at this idea. So I'm working on it. I'll just say I'm working on it.
The biggest thing that I've found just in writing all sorts of different things, especially with fiction, is that when you're writing the first draft, whatever it is, you're telling the story to yourself.
Right.
It's what you already know. And then the showing can come in later.
Mm-hmm.
You can think about the readers after the fact. And that can kind of help make it a little less daunting, because you don't just sit there and psych yourself out thinking, I need to convey how deep this emotion is. No, I just need to I need to convey it to me first, and then I can worry about making it accessible for anyone who's going to read it.
Right. Oh, that's such good advice.
Yeah.
Let's go to Tilo, and then we'll go to Carrie. Give Tilo a moment to unmute. You all are making me jazzed to do some writing.
Hello.
Hello, Tilo.
Hi. Yeah, I liked all of them, but there was one that kind of resonates with the nature one. He's coming back, and then it gets windy and stuff, and it's almost like he's in a full blizzard.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a, well, because he's blind, a whiteout. I've been in those situations before, and it's scary. He's right, you can't tell the direction in that when the wind and the snow and stuff. But there was one time my mom, she used to, for a job, used to deliver flowers, and there was a whiteout, and on top of that, it was fog. So she didn't get her work done until midnight because she had to go slow in the fog and in the snow coming down real hard.
Mm-hmm. It
It
really
was
messes up all of your senses, doesn't it?
really, really scary. Yeah, it does.
I've met a lot of people that have gone blind because they've nearly froze to death. And then when you're starting to freeze, the first thing that freezes is your eyes.
Yeah.
And your nerve endings are right there, exposed, and they don't come back.
Yeah, I had my fingers frostbitten, and I couldn't have the tip of my fingers. I couldn't feel for 12 weeks. It was funny.
Wow.
I can feel pressure, but no feeling.
Yeah.
The doctor said if that ever happened to me again, he says, quite soon, he says, it's possible I would lose my fingers. I said, no, that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, because your fingers are your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Tilo.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to go Carrie, and then we've got Louise. So Carrie, you're up, my friend.
Hi, all.
Carrie, welcome.
So I've read this anthology. Robert, you're on my Facebook. And so I remember when the call came out at the time. So I'm a writer also. So I believe in the writing community and being a good a literary citizen. So sharing other people's writing and opportunities for everyone. So I remember sharing it at the time, and I wanted to get together at the time to submit something also, but I didn't. But I do have one story idea that I'm not sure if it's going to be a good fit anywhere, actually, because it's actually 90% fiction, but it's based on a trip to New York City I took before the pandemic. And I don't know if anybody heard about it, but it was a story in the news several years ago about how Donald Trump allegedly had a fit when there was Braille on his elevators in his building.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I heard that.
I heard about
I
that.
heard about that.
You were there?
So I heard about that, and so when I went to New York, I just had to go to Trump Tower and to get an idea for a story. So I ended up writing a story based in Trump Tower. It ends up being like a fantasy story, so it's like what I would like to have happened to sort of show him, here you have a problem with Braille. Well, take this. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure many publishers might shy away from wanting to publish something like that. I'm not sure.
Look at how many Netflix and Amazon and insert all sorts of various streaming services things there are about sort of going into the minds of various people that have done bad things, and you're basically doing a almost revenge plot line. I don't see how that is. That's very much a similar strain of those people. I think you definitely have an audience and people who will want to publish it.
It's kind of like that. Yeah.
Like my literary lust, if you will, is like revenge stories. So, yep.
Well, I never would have guessed that about you, Robert. Holy mackerel! There's a whole new side of you.
Oh yeah. Trust me, there's a lot of weird literary things you don't know about me
Oh.
yet. So.
Let's come up with the title for the next anthology, because I'm thinking like Empire Strikes Back, but it's like The Blind Strike Back or something.
Blind revenge stories. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Maybe at some point we'll be able to have a listen to your story as well once you finish it.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I read the anthology, as I said, and great job, all of you. And it was so great to see not only a few friends of mine in there, like Leona, my friend, who has a story in there called Inspiration Porn Star. If you guys haven't read the whole anthology, anybody listening here tonight, really go check the anthology out once, after this. And there's some great stories in there by people. And again, I also love podcasting. So I love to tell stories through my podcast and through audio storytelling. So great job, Lawrence, with your podcast. And yeah, great job, everyone.
What's your podcast called?
It's called Outlook on Radio Western, because it's a podcast, but it's also aired on Radio Western in London, the University of Western Ontario. So
cool.
But yeah, I have yours on my feed. So good job.
Yeah, I'm going to look up yours. Outlook on Radio Western.
Yeah.
Cool. All
I
right.
love the sharing. I love the
I hope there is another anthology planned, because I maybe I'll submit next time.
Yes.
Awesome.
There's an anthology being planned involving disabled superheroes. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get some information on that in just a moment from Robert, because maybe there'll be some folks here who might want to submit. Yeah. Louise, let's take your hand.
Hi, everyone. Wow. I love stories. I've always been a person who takes and listens to a story, and I find something in a story that most people won't look for. I listen internally to a story, and each of them, I found something that was unique, but it was the music one that really got my bones going. Sorry, voiceover one.
What was it in particular?
It was near the end when she was getting ready to sing and she was getting her mind set. It was like, I felt that in my bones, like every part of me, though I'm not a music person, I felt it happening. I was like, okay, you can do this. You can do this. Because I many times feel like that. And it's like, yes, you can focus and figure out how to do it. And that's what I felt like you were trying to get across in the story. You can focus, you can do what you want to do, and you can, and even though there was a sad memory in there, the writer, the story overcame it in its own way. Not perfectly, but overcame it to understand that what their journey would be in a way. I don't know what the story long-term would have been when though she stayed in the class in music. What was her long-term? I figured she got into music, mentally. But the point was the fact that she was so negative, and then when she went to sing, she had to prove herself, that she had to be who she was and share what was deep inside her. And that's something I do when I say a story. Lori can, and Amy can maybe say, I'm a person who feels. So when I share a story, my story comes across in feeling. I can't write it. If I could have someone sit down and write my stories, whoa, they would be powerful, because I feel. I could share and get across what I'm feeling, but I cannot write it as good. And that's a lot of people. We can feel and we share, but we can't sit and write it fast enough to get it across. My spelling and punctuation and grammar would be so off, but I can share a story. I actually, sorry, my husband's playing with a new set of headset and it keeps coming off the Bluetooth. But no, I mean, I can sit down when I lost my last guide to death. I sat down the next afternoon and 3 hours wrote a tribute to him. That was my heart. My heart was in it. And that's the one thing when I write or say something or do something, my heart's in it. It's like, if I'm very much that way. And I want to ask a question. I'm afraid to ask this question. Is this book on Sela? Because I want to read the whole book.
Well, hold that thought, Louise. We're gonna get to that in just a moment. But
thank you guys.
Robert,
for
you know
those...
what Sela is?
Yes. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. I'm always curious when an American knows what Sela is. But yes, Robert says yes, it's on Sela, but we're also offering it as our prize this evening, a copy of the book as well, as the door prize. So either way, y'all will be able to find a copy of it somewhere.
Thank you so much, Louise. You really hit the nail on the head as far as what this story is very much about, the emotional journey of it. And that frankly really surprised me while first drafting it. I didn't quite realize, I knew where it was going. I just didn't know if it would be several classes before it got to where it needed to be. And I was informed very viscerally by the character that no, just getting to sing after this many years was enough. And yeah, that's definitely, I think, an aspect of writing that's part of the fun, getting the emotion out and making either the emotion or the concentration, how you need to get to these moments, as visceral as they can be.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, spelling and grammar, I just would like to say one thing about that. I mean, so working within the literary industry, I've come across a lot of frankly ableist kind of attitudes and thoughts, and one of those is spelling and grammar. It's now for me, I mean, took a lot of it took a lot of internal soul searching to uh, really look at why is it do I frown upon bad spelling and grammar, but it really came down to I don't actually frown upon it. I've been conditioned to frown upon it by the wider society. So if you do have any problems with spelling grammar, just know that it's not the most important thing. Just get your emotions on the page and then we'll clean up the grammar and things later. And that's the thing I wish the wider literary industry would pay more attention to, is the emotions rather than the spelling of a word.
I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Niki.
I think that's starting to happen a little more.
Okay.
What I'm seeing, even in just general discussions, which is lovely, and querying, I'm seeing lots of little addendums to all the general information saying, like, don't worry about the spelling. It's okay if there are a few wrong words. We aren't looking for perfection. We're looking for a good story. That's been really encouraging to see over the last. I think the bulk of the pandemic really kind of made some people sit back and go, I think we're being just a little bit too critical in the face of the world.
Right. Robert, why don't you throw out what's happening with the next anthology?
Woohoo! Okay, so my next anthology in the works is about disabled superheroes. Literally, so think like a deaf Superman or or like a blind and visually impaired Aquaman. So that anthology, it's currently in the planning stages right now. So keep an eye out in 2023 for a submission call.
Robert, how do folks like get on your radar in terms of knowing where to find you so that they get the submission call?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to my website, which is blindjournalist.wordpress.com, or you can go to the alternative URL, stopbanningbooks.com, and then that'll take you to my web page. So that'll be the easiest to get a hold of me. So.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited about what's happening with all of you all. I'm a big fan of the work that you've done. I'm a big fan of the anthology. I've listened to all of the stories myself, and we're gonna auction. That's like the highest bidder. We're gonna raffle off a copy of the book, and then we'll send a link in the post email so that folks can, find a copy of it out in the world somewhere. So, Robert, we're going to bring Sarah out into the space, and she's got the list of all of the folks who are still on our participants list, who are eligible to receive a prize opportunity. And then you're going to pull a name. So, Sarah, are you with us?
Hi, this is Sarah. I just wanted to note, I'm so sorry my webcam's not working today, but I am here.
Okay.
So, Robert, at any time, please feel free to yell out a word that most resonates with you. And when you do, I'm going to stop the raffle and pick our winner. So
Okay.
anytime you're ready.
So you want me to say just literally any word?
Any
cookie.
word, yeah.
Cookie!
Oh, that's a great word. And with that, our winner tonight is Lori or Laurette, as we have the name here tonight, Van Allen.
Lori Van Allen. Congratulations, Lori.
Yay, thank you.
So we'll connect with you and make sure that you get a copy of this book.
Thank you.
And then maybe, next time we're in a social environment together, you can tell us your experience about it, because I'm sure folks will want to know.
Oh, yes, definitely.
And then for other folks, we'll circulate a link so that you can purchase or find the book. That's, the most accessible way for you to get the book. So there you go, friends. That's it. It's a wrap. I just want to say a big thank you to Robert for joining us, Tessa, Niki, and Lawrence for spending time with us in the space. I know it's way past bedtime for many of you. So thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight on this almost live event, talking about your stories and Artificial Divide.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Amy. Yeah.
Thank you.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.